to the same room.
Hey, roommates! If you did not know, this season of The Same Room, we are coming to you from home. Now, although it may look a little bit different, but the conversations are going to be just as powerful. Like today's episode, I get to speak with hip hop artist, activist, and best selling author Lecrae, alongside the best selling author of Cry Like a Man, Mr. Jason Wilson. And we're going to have a conversation on the importance of embracing emotional health for the African American male as a response to life, loss, and injustice. And so let's get into it. Before we really get into the fullness of the conversation, I think that it's so powerful for us to first acknowledge the anger and the pain that has been, just the everyday Black woman and Black man have been dealing with. One of the things that I do find very beautiful in the time that we're in is that it almost seems like for the very first time, the voice of the Black people are being heard and being heard in a loud way. But I want to ask you both, as Black men and Black fathers, how are you processing the time that we are in?
When the pandemic hit, we lost a lot of friends, and I lost a childhood friend and his father in 1 week. And then Ahmaud was gunned down, and then the death of Brother George. And just to be able to grieve is almost impossible now because we have to do so virtually. And so just trying to truly just lean on, I think it's Isaiah 26:3, that he who keeps his mind focused on the Lord, that the Lord will keep them in perfect peace. And so that's how I've been making it. And just, dealing with the anger, processing it, allowing myself to reflect on it so that I can release and reset is a daily process. And, but yet I still have hope because I really see God's hand in this, meaning that, we wanted this to happen. Honestly, we wanted racial justice for our people. And it's going to take a fight. It's going to take sacrifice. And unfortunately, it's going to cost lives. And so in that I find hope, but I still hurt when anyone loses their life, when I see protesters being abused by police, brutalized, and even, killed by police. And then, just trying to keep up and keep going and still do our jobs. And, what I do working with young Black boys, helping them navigate through their emotions and their fears and letting them know it's okay to feel fear. We just can't succumb to it.
I definitely want people to be encouraged and be hopeful, but I'll be honest, this is one of the most probably intense seasons of my life. Not the most difficult, because I think I'm more grounded and my faith is a lot stronger and able to navigate what's going on. But it's more intense because I'm having to learn how to do stuff I never had to do before. You know what I mean? I gotta homeschool my kids. I gotta cook way more often. I gotta figure out what it means to not, be a touring artist and travel and find other ways to provide. I gotta, teach my kids about systemic racism in a more intentional way than I've ever had to do before. My son asked me, what do we do to be hated so bad? And I gotta help him process that. And then I gotta make sure I'm taking care of myself, my own mental, emotional, and spiritual, self, so that I can be beneficial for everybody else. So it's been intense, real intense.
I love even what you just mentioned with how it's been for you as a father, as a husband, as a provider, because I think we often hear, and it's crazy, but there's more of the story of the woman, how the woman is adjusting in these times in the homes, but to even hear the pressure that you're feeling even as men, and when you talk about having to educate your son, like what was that like? What was that conversation like?
Yeah, it was, it was very difficult for him to process. He just didn't understand because for him, he's a child who doesn't get the historical issues that are going on in America. So all he hears is that for some reason, Black people are not liked. And so he's trying to wrestle with that. So really what I was doing was encouraging him through the scriptures and letting them know that he's wonderfully and fearfully made, that he's God's workmanship, that he's made in the image of God, and just trying to solidify his identity. So when the world says all this other crazy stuff to him, he can refer back to that and say, okay, this is who I am. But it was formative. It's a thin line, because you don't, they should be worrying about toys and pool parties. They shouldn't have to be thinking about people getting gunned down in the street or choked out. It's crazy.
Wow.
My grandfather was lynched and beaten, and so it really hits home for me, because I saw the direct impact of the trauma on my mother and her siblings. And, since the cave started, I always taught young boys to be respectful. Don't argue your ticket. The car is not the courtroom. We'll deal with this in court. And yes, sir, and no, sir. But when my boys ask me, they say, they call me Sharath, which means servant in Hebrew. They says, well, what happened? George Floyd was complying. What happened? He still died. Mm. That hit me really hard, because we have to train our sons in ways that no other ethnic group has to train their children. And my son said, he says, Dad, I thought the police were supposed to be the good guys, to serve and protect. I don't understand this. And so to explain to him what happens when the hearts of men grow wax cold, when sin goes unchecked, and that's what has been happening. And now it's time to check it, and it's going to take a vigilant spirit. But in the process of that, many men have to understand that we have to let go. We have to, I say cry like a man. I don't mean just shedding tears, but release the trauma and like the pain and the things that we went through that's in our heart and our minds that we've been conditioned to suppress. And I always tell men when I meet them, they cry, I say, look, man, suppression leads to depression. We can't keep fighting if we're always hurting. And so, like Lecrae said, I have to look, Stephanie, I have to teach my son about how to monitor his own facial expressions. Mm. Because I even know Black mentors, men who are insecure, who will curse him out or try to punch him if they feel that he's disrespecting him just by the way he's looking. And so wow. I have to get in the mirror with him soon, because he's 12 years old, he's almost 6 feet. I don't know who he's going to come across in the streets. I don't know if he's going to get pulled over with his uncle and it's a racist police officer. And so our boys, we have to teach them, don't look like you're not listening. Always pay attention. Don't have an attitude. I mean, it becomes overwhelming, and then it makes our boys feel like they're not human. And I have a big problem with that. And then with our men not being able to express their humanity, that we can't even, cry or even say, hey man, I'm scared. I have so many men message me saying, I'm scared and I'm about to have a panic attack because I can't tell no one. I can't leave my house because my wife may think I'm weak if I share this. If I leave the house or if I share it with her, I feel like I'm weak. And so it's like, we just at a tipping point, especially with us as a people and our men. And it's just time, like I said, I found hope after prayer this morning that the Most High is in this. This is what we prayed for. You can't have peace if there isn't conflict. You can't be a peacekeeper if there's not conflict. Blessed are the peacekeepers. And so we have to run to these wars. We have to fight, and we have to be very strategic instead of being led by our emotions all the time.
Now, from your perspective, from both of you, from you both's perspective, have you ever felt like we've been heard the way we are being heard right now in this time?
I think, to me, using your voice for these types of issues should cost you something. And this is almost becoming trendy, you know what I mean? To where it's not costing anybody anything to say something about it. So I think when I really feel like, okay, we're making progress is when changes start to be implemented. I think the voices are being raised more consistently and we're fed up for sure. But the changes are when I'm like, okay, like now we're being heard because things are really changing.
There's this thin line of trying to decipher if someone's intentions were good in speaking up or if their intentions are for their benefit or to just join a wave. But regardless of where they stand, do we see the amplification of voices still supporting our cause?
I do. I was just watching a video today, just seeing all the nations standing with us, yelling "Black Lives Matter," and it's definitely our voices are being heard more. Also, because you hear our other brothers and sisters of different ethnicities yelling as well with us and protesting and fighting. As far as the activists who you're referring to, people who want to be activists but are actors and again, like are being exposed, spray painting our buildings, and you're not even from the city, things like that. That comes with it. You're always going to have that. But at the end of the day, I see a mass awakening, and it's beautiful to see more than just us standing.
I love that. Even just talking about the protests and talking about the looters and the people that were, spray painting, and how many of them were not even from the city, but yet the media, we see that those were the images that the media wanted to portray. And so thinking about the media, there is this limited portrayal of who the Black man is. And from your perspective, what is missing and what is misunderstood?
Yeah, I would say, for so long, especially being a hip hop artist, only one version of us was told to, American society. Only one picture of us was painted, and it limited our who we were collectively. And I think it traumatized us because it made us feel like we can't be our full selves in society because our full selves will not be accepted and will not be embraced. And then it perpetuates this idea that unless of respectability politics, unless you're a straight A student, you went to Harvard, your hair looks a certain way, you will not be embraced by American culture. And so if you have braids and you in a white t-shirt and you're out there during a protest, you must be one of them thugs. You know what I mean? And so, it just perpetuates an idea, I think, that we're limited and we're just all this homogenous people that are all the same. And really there's a lot of dynamics to us. I got on a hoodie. I'm working on my master's degree. I got tattoos visible. I have, an honorary doctorate. You know what I mean? So it's like, you stop trying to put us in these little boxes. I think that becomes dangerous. And that's when the outrage starts, because people just keep suppressing us into this little box. So.
I have to echo what Lecrae is saying. Many don't know I was a real popular DJ, and back in the late 80s and 90s. And so I literally saw how if you weren't a hyper masculine male in the city of Detroit, where I grew up in, you couldn't make it. And it produced a generation of what we call thugs. And it wasn't until like maybe 2 years ago that the Most High told me what a thug really was. And it's an acronym, a traumatized human unable to grieve. And that's why we're so stuck as men that we have to tattoo tears on our face for us to show that we're hurting. Or, the other side of that also means that you've killed someone. But at the end of the day, or you lost someone, but at the end of the day, we're hurting and we can't express it by the natural way that God created us to express these emotions. Like, it's not just women who have tear ducts, men do. And then Dr. William Frey discovered that tears, when you cry from emotional pain or grief, not only are 98% water, but also contain stress hormones, which is why we feel better typically after we cry. And so here it is, we're telling men not to cry. And then, the culture, I call it misconstrued masculinity, a misunderstanding of what it is to be a man, basically. We call it, like, masculinity itself, first of all, is not toxic. I hate that phrase, toxic masculinity, because if a fireman was to run into a burning building and rescue someone, we applaud the masculine effort. And then we only allow men, like when you look up the word masculinity, it's by its definition, it's attributes that are traditionally ascribed to men, such as strength, boldness, aggression, and strength, boldness, aggression, etc., or masculine attire. And so if strength, boldness, and aggression is considered masculine, well, Our sister Harriet Tubman exuded masculine attributes when she had to be strong, bold, and courageous. So you're telling me you're going to lock a man into just one attribute of the comprehensive nature that the Most High created him? And then we wonder why we behave in toxic ways. It's similar. I gave an analogy of the pit bull terrier. You know, when I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, this dog was mainly used for fighting and protection. And we quickly saw over the years that this dog became unstable, attacking kids unannounced. And also, the dog was banned in many cities. But what happened when animal rights groups came and rescued this breed and nurtured this animal and allowed this animal to operate outside of two attributes, protector and a fighter? They saw quickly that this pit bull terrier that has this terrible reputation as being unloving, unstable, and something to be feared, also to be banned, was also a loving, compassionate animal. So when you box a man who is also nurturing, compassionate, loving, but also strong, courageous, when you box them into just one attribute, this is what we get. And it's unfortunate now that, as statistically, men, we die by suicide 3 to 4 times as likely as women. It's not that our sisters don't have the same amount of stress that we do, it's that we're not allowed to express the pain that we feel inside. And that's what many doctors believe, is that because we keep suppressing it, allowing this culture to define us. And inside of us, we're rotting away. And it's just, you know, again, it grieves my spirit when I see it. And then when we come out of this, I was telling Lecrae, PTSD the symptoms are going to be overwhelming. And just like a soldier at war who can't show his emotions, and then when he gets back home, he can't show his emotions. Now he feels that he's insane, and it's just so unfair.
Wow. You know, there's a lot that you just shared in that to unpack. I mean, from your revelation of Behind Thug, and just the weight of what it means to hold, like just suppressing all those emotions, because there's a lot of misconceptions around why the Black man seems cold, you know, and I think part of that is even our relationship to trauma. And there's this, because you have people that say, you know, but this happened 400 years ago, or this happened how many years ago? Why are you so affected by it? But we we lose sight on the fact that because of starting from what happened in slavery until now, one of the most traumatic experiences that has been just a consistent outcome is absent fathers. And so there is this relationship that as Black people we have with trauma that is very misunderstood. You know, for example, my father was murdered when I was a baby. And as a result of that, what my natural response to men, because you have a lot of people that talk about how their fathers, that was their first love, right? And so my natural response, unknown to me, when it came to relationships, was to be, you know, to that need to be in control, or to kind of be shut off, like just guarded, because I never had the safety of understanding that feeling and that emotion with a present male in my life. And I thought what I was doing was protecting myself, and it was just the natural response. And then come to find out, the older you get and the more aware you are of yourself and your emotions, that this was just buried pain. This was layers of pain that was buried of not having this man present in my life. Now, I know that you both have been vocal about absent fathers, you know, your father's being absent. When did you, first of all, what was the impact of that in your lives? And when did you realize that impact they had on you?
I remember being in probably like kindergarten and asking my mom. I think something had occurred, and I was asking my mom where my dad was, and that was the first time I was aware that something was different. You know, that I was like, oh, I don't have a dad. And then I think in high school, just seeing, you know, playing sports and seeing so many dads supporting their sons. I remember one of my friend's dad, before a game, he brought him a new pair of Jordans and brought it to the game as like a gift. You know, we had made it to the district playoffs, and he brought him these Jordans as a gift. And I just thought to myself, wow, like that's what dads are supposed to do, huh? And so I think I remember feeling that pain during those time periods, especially as I got older and breakups started happening, and I didn't know what to do, how to deal with all those emotions, and it was just nobody to ask. And I think that's when it really began to be more traumatizing for me, in terms of learning how to suppress it and saying, all right, well, I got to do something with this stuff because I'm not seeing anybody else, process this stuff out loud. So yeah, I think, that was probably it for me, growing up. And then, becoming a father, you realize you missed a lot of tools. You missed a lot of perspectives and different things. And now you have to start from scratch. You got books and you got other men that you can ask questions to, but yeah, a lot of people got a head start around that track that you didn't get. So that's what I went through.
You brought up a good point, because when you said learning how to suppress it, when your relationship with trauma starts from home, we are taught how to suppress pain from a very young age. Mm-hmm. And so that becomes our norm. And so that this essence of why does the Black man not cry, we learn this very early on from traumatic experiences that come as a result of other things.
I noticed something was wrong when I was younger. I mean, my father was in the same city, but he was absent in my life. He would, not purposefully or verbally abuse me, but because he was wounded by his dad, he just transferred that on to me because he didn't know how to process it. And, into our father's defense and our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers, many of them were just 3 generations away from slavery. So all they knew how to do anyway was to provide and protect. They didn't have time or the opportunity to jump on a Zoom call or a Skype call to talk about emotional wellness and mental health. And so when I started to understand that, I gave my father grace. But when I was younger, he would never come to any of my football games or my graduations or anything, except when I graduated from high school. But middle school graduation, he says, man, I wait for the real one. And that hurt, but I suppressed it. I remember I dropped a pass, and this is what really shifted my life. And he comes down from the stands because I could have won the game for my team. First thing he says to me is, I heard you drop the game-winning pass. I just dropped my head and I couldn't say another word. Stephanie, it wasn't until maybe, I don't know how many years later, but I was married to my wife and my daughter was 16 years old. I was in my office. All of a sudden, the Holy Spirit said, I need you to get healed from that. And I'm like, from what? He says, the trauma you took in that moment. Your father said, you said, your father said, I heard you drop the pass. He wasn't even there to see it. Come to find out, my father came at the end of the game. I was hoarding all of that pain in my heart just so that I wouldn't do something else to make him disappointed, like cry or be sad. And so at that moment, I ran into my daughter's room because we had gotten an argument, and I dropped to her knees and I cried and I said, I am so sorry. She was like, Daddy, for what? You just being a protective dad. I'm like, no. I said, I didn't get the affirmation and love from my dad, so I'm transferring that lack onto you. And she forgave me, and we were able to move on. It took some time, but we were able to move on. And as I fast forward to my son, and I know Lecrae can, identify with this, one day, I never forgot, we were in the basement training and grappling. And he said, Dad, how did you become a great dad when your father wasn't? And I looked at him, I'm like, wow, that's a simple but profound question. And I just said from my heart, son, I gave you what I longed for. And so many fathers, Black fathers, and look, I see a lot of them because of our academy and what we do for Black boys. And I can tell you this, I haven't met a Black father who doesn't want to be in their son's or their daughter's life. The problem lies in them not loving themselves. They don't feel that they're even good enough or worthy enough. They feel guilty when their sons say, Dad, you're great, because inside they feel weak and a failure and a loser because they can't even get a job because they're a felon now. And so to not have that father, you know, it was so important even in the Bible. The God, I believe, Lecrae, am I correct, spoke twice audibly in the New Testament, and both of them was affirming his son, Jesus. It was so important that he affirmed his son before men, that this is my son whom I'm well pleased. But yet, here we are, me and Lecrae are grown men. Although I've forgiven my father, and I went back Sankofa to get him and to allow him to cry and heal, and finally was able to hear him say he loved me after 38 years. You still have those little holes inside of your heart that are missing those times when you needed affirmation. And so as men, we try to work through that. And it's so hard because we don't have, again, our fathers and grandfathers, they're hurting. And they're just left to, not, I don't want to say this and make it sound hard, but they're left to die with that pain. You know, we often quote Frederick Douglass when he says it's easier to train up a child or raise up a child than it is to repair a broken man. He did not mean that we should leave men broken. And that's what we're doing in our communities. It's like they're hurting, and it's just, you know, it's just time. And I can't condemn Black fathers because I talk to them. They're hurting and they want a way out. But until we as men become transparent, allow ourselves to be vulnerable. You know, the Bible says iron sharpens iron, so as one man sharpens another. And I always say, we can't sharpen your sword, brother, if you always keep it sheathed. We can never see if your blade is dull, if you're struggling with sin, if you're hurting, if you can't cut that bad habit. So we have to expose the blade of our sword so that we can be sharpened. And it's just going to take some time. But like I said, I'm just thankful that we're to this place now where two strong men, Black men, can talk about topics like this without having to say, say, stay strong, brother. I stopped saying that. As soon as we say stay strong to a brother who's hurting, we're subconsciously telling him that being weak or fatigued is weak, or just is not acceptable, or is not real manhood. So I don't say stay strong no more. I say express yourself. If you have an opportunity, especially as believers, as Christians, we know that the power of Christ is perfected in our weakness. So when you tell a man of the Most High not to be weak, you hinder the power of Christ in you. And so I now am proud. I boast like Paul in my weakness, because only in that am I strong. And when we grasp that, when a man can take a nap without feeling guilty, that when his wife comes in, he has to jump up and act like he's doing something so that he won't be another lazy Negro.
So now when you talk about weakness, I think about anger. And layered beneath anger is really hurt. When we look at the times that we are in and we see the backdrop of anger and rage, how do we process that constructively, where you can speak to a person that allows them to be weak and embrace the fact of what the pain really is and embrace their hurt? Because, for example, Lecrae, I saw that you recently posted on your Instagram that I've been trying not to go off the deep end, right? And I wanted you to expand on that, because how do we embrace that feeling of I'm frustrated, I'm hurt, and express that in a healthy way? And not because being angry is not really the problem, right? But it's how we express that anger in our community, in our lives, to our friends, how we express that. How do we express that and embrace the weakness of our emotions, the weakness of how we feel in response to what we're seeing?
I've always been taught that leaders lead in vulnerability. And so I won't say I've always been taught, but in my transition to being a healthier version of myself, you know, just leading in vulnerability. And you have to do that. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be honest. That's the only way, you know, if you never address the wound, it's not going to heal. You can ignore cancer all you want. If it's there, it's going to spread. And so until you address it and acknowledge it and be vulnerable with a doctor and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling, this is how it's affecting me, then they can't help you. If you keep your mouth shut and suppress that and keep quiet about it, then it's going to fester, it's going to spread, and it's going to ultimately kill you. So it's just finding healthy ways. I think another unfortunate aspect, especially like within the social media culture, is that, you know, we're just venting to the outside world, you know, not to people who care about us and who want to help us and walk with us through the process. We're just throwing it into the atmosphere. And in a lot of ways, you're opening yourself up for what you were afraid of being vulnerable for in the first place. You were afraid of being vulnerable, and because of your vulnerability, uh, you know, being condescended or talked down to, and then it creates a cycle. You know, you're vulnerable, people take your vulnerability and shame you, then you walk away in shame, and then your shame, you know, becomes toxic, and now your toxic shames create more problems, and then you need to talk about it, but you don't want to be vulnerable, because if you're vulnerable, they're going to shame you, and it's just going to be a cycle. So you got to have people that you know, can trust. I don't care if that's a therapist, I don't care if that's a pastor, I don't care if that's great friends around you, but you got to have that community of people that you can be vulnerable with. Otherwise, it's going to create, you know, a toxicity within you.
And just speaking about vulnerability and speaking about that freedom, you know, I recently heard you, Mr. Wilson, when you stated that you long to see men free themselves from emotional incarceration. And what struck me about that is, do men even know they're emotionally incarcerated?
Unfortunately, being emotionally incarcerated is the only safe space for many Black men. So it's like, imagine, I describe it like a jail cell with the door open. We can leave, but we don't want to get hurt. So we stay here, we hide. When we have to leave, we put on a Superman cape, we put on a Batman mask, because we can never let you see Bruce Wayne. We can only let you see Batman. Then we go back to our cave because it's safe to cry, to get high, to watch porn, to do drugs, whatever. So in short, many men don't believe they're in emotional incarceration because we've been conditioned to believe that's the safest space for us to dwell. And, you know, something else you had said about anger and being able to process it. You know, as a man, for me, I can speak for myself. I saw how being emotionally incarcerated was emotionally imploding me and my family. The rage that I was holding from my father not being there, always trying to be not a people pleaser, but make everyone happy. And I've learned that those who try to make everyone happy are usually the most unhappiest people in the world. And so I said, well, wait a minute. Why am I giving this world the best me, which was really the fake me, and
Wow.
come home and be this tyrant? Because I believe this passive Christianity that's been taught that truly wasn't Yeshua or Jesus, that truly wasn't David, that truly wasn't Joshua, Gideon, Caleb, Paul. I can go down the line. When I got fed up, when I saw that I'm about to lose my family because I'm being fake, I'm not being comprehensive, because I'm not expressing myself like a man who has more emotions or more attributes than a protector and a provider, I took a stand with myself and took a stand against my soul. So David says, he says, I've weaned my soul like a mother weans its child from her breast. The soul is like a child. It's selfish. It wants what it wants. It's the seat of our emotions. Until we deal with that as men, till we're able to first allow it to release what it's feeling, the emotions behind a breakup with a girl, losing a job, or backing down from a job promotion you knew you should have gotten, but because of a lack of affirmation, you didn't feel you were good enough to apply for it. Whatever it is, when we allow ourselves to express these emotions, starting in the car or walking around the block or in your closet or in your basement, your man cave, wherever, I started the process, Stephanie. From there, I was able to break out of my closet and then go into a room, and then to get around other men. If a man right now is watching this and desires to break free from emotional incarceration, if he can get himself around other men who are feeling the same way, and the person who's leading this group allows men to talk about the pain they're feeling, eventually every man in there will open up and cry and let their guard down, because the next man is, the next man is, the next man is. And that's what we're missing as men. It's like the power of being vulnerable, it actually opens up the door for other men to break free. Because they say, wow, that's why I'm real transparent on social media. I don't care really what you think, because I'm not going back in that jail cell. I don't want you to look up to me anyway like an idol. Only one belongs in that position is the Most High. I want you to see the things I struggle with, that I argue with my wife sometimes, but we reconcile immediately. That I learned now that I can be adamant about a discussion without being offensive and crushing my wife's spirit. And so those things happen when I learned how to say, wow, Nicole, that hurt me what you just said. If we're arguing about finances, say, wow, you don't trust me? After all these years, what have I done wrong where I've jeopardized our finances? The old Jason, boom, hit the table, or it's a dent on one of our refrigerators right now, because I didn't know that anger was rooted in being hurt. But once I can say, wow, you really think that way about me? My wife now is open now to talk to me, because it's not this masculine male coming at her. And so I say that so when a man knows how to dig deep inside of him and express his true emotion, whether the anger's birth from hurt or lack of affirmation or whatever, the wife is then like, whoa, this is familiar. I feel safe now that I can talk to you. And so I guess I can wrap it up just by saying, as men, start the journey. It may take one day where you take 2 steps off of the bed in your jail cell, then take 3 steps, then take 4 steps. Then you may go back one, but start the process. And like Lecrae says, don't discount therapy, counseling, mentoring, and pastors who can pour into your life.
Wow, that is beautiful, because we see how the power of vulnerability not only restores oneself, but restores their home, restores relationships. And just thinking about restoration, Lecrae, you have a book coming out, and the title of the book is I Am Restored. And the beauty is that, previously you had a book called Unashamed, and we see this shame that is often attached to vulnerability, that I believe that, but the men that are going to watch this, really for that healing, true healing, Mr. Wilson, for you to know the side of you that in anger can have a dent on the fridge, and the other side of you that can say, let's sit down, let's talk, this hurt me. So now I can process, I can express that in a manner where you understand my pain, rather than what we're used to when anger is not is not processed in a healthy way. What I'm expressing is not my pain. I'm expressing to you, I want you to be in pain for the fact that I'm in pain. Now it's just like that saying when they say broken people break people. So rather, because I don't want you to see it, but I want you to experience it. And I think that's the difference, because when we embrace weakness, we can say, you know what, here I am, like I'm hurt by this. But I think that when we see anger being destructive in society or in our homes, is because I'm hiding this. And the only way you're going to understand that I'm in pain is if you feel it too.
Boom.
We
don't need to say nothing to that.
But that was one of the things that I learned, is that if you're upset and I walk away hurt, when in reality, you're hurt. Why am I walking away hurt? So there is something is not being processed properly, because rather than you saying, hey, let me show you my scar so that you can help heal me. No, it's let me make you feel what I feel. And that's the best way I can express it. And so by you sharing this, I think that is so powerful, because we see that now if your pain is breaking me, now we're breaking the home. Now we're breaking a relationship. Now we're breaking friendship. Now we're breaking trust. And so this cycle of, dysfunction, just continues. And so to me, that is so powerful. But even going back to you, Lecrae, what has that journey been from unashamed to restoration? What has that been like? I mean, this conversation is blessing me.
I mean, I always tell people, you know, God is he's not transactional, he's relational. So he doesn't snap his fingers and make it go away. He walks with you through it. And so you know, it may have took a moment for me to be removed from slavery, but it takes a lifetime to get the slavery out of me. And so it's been a journey, you know, and you don't arrive. You just embrace the fact that this is a journey. That healing is a journey. You don't get to a place where you're like, yes, I made it. You get to a place where you're like, I'm consistent in working on becoming a healthier version of myself. I'm consistent in being healthier today than I was yesterday. Um, so that's really what it was. It was embracing that. A lot of people think that they're in good shape. That's the problem. It's like a person who never goes to the gym or doesn't eat healthy. You know, most of them are like, well, because I'm functioning well, I'm in good shape. And until you get in the gym and you like, oh my goodness, why can't I breathe? It's because, well, you're not in as good shape as you thought you were. Or you get to the doctor and you're like, why do I have high cholesterol? You're not in as good a shape as you thought you were. So for me, it was embracing the fact that I wasn't in good shape, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I just had to come to that realization. I thought I was fine. I thought I was strong because I wasn't allowing all of my historical traumas to, you know, wreck me. I thought that made me strong. But the truth of the matter was it really was my weakness. And it's like a dam that just builds up, you know, and eventually it's going to break. And so you're not strong because you can build up all that trauma and problems just building up against it. That doesn't make you strong. You know, actually, you acknowledging that you don't have what it takes is your strength.
Now, Mr. Wilson, you know, how would you just as we continue this conversation on vulnerability and the power of vulnerability, what do you say would be the impact, even in light of our fight for justice in this time? What is the impact for the Black man who embraces emotional health and emotional healing? What is the power of being emotionally healthy as we respond to injustice?
The main benefit of the power is that you can actually reset instead of burning out. You know, unfortunately, too many of us as men, especially activists or community servants, find our worth in our work. And so if that's the case, we'll never rest. And we knows what happens when we don't rest. And so, I mean, I have to leave them nameless because they're very well known activists, and they're hurting. They're wore out, all the trauma they're dealing with, fighting, and but when there's a difference between knowing what fires to put out and which ones to let burn out. Unfortunately, when you are identified by only what you can do, you're trying to put everything out. And when you become comprehensive and you can express how you feel and be vulnerable and you can rest, knowing as the scriptures say that the Most High blesses those he loves even in their sleep, when you haven't completed every task. I think it's Psalm 120, 120 something. I don't know it by heart, but it talks about what benefit is it to stay up late knowing you have to rise early. Don't you know that the Most High will bless you even while you're asleep? So as men, when you can't rest, when your mind is constantly going, um, how good are you the next day? I know I'm not as good as I am when I get a full 7 hours sleep, which is mandatory for me because I understand the psychological benefits of rest. As far as anger, when you see men who smile and are calm and all of a sudden they just lose it and the rage comes out, it's because they've been told, and many of us been told that anger is a bad thing. But the scriptures talk about how anger is, it says, be angry, but do not sin, Ephesians 4:26. So there is a power in anger, but yet, like you're saying, Stephanie, if it's not channeled correctly, it can be dangerous. So what I can just give you an analogy in martial arts for men who may be watching. When you're doing, just say, grappling and you want to submit someone by an arm lock technique or whatever, and you're constantly focusing on this one technique. And in the process of this anger, because you can't get this one technique, you're missing like 10 other techniques where you could have won the match.
Mm.
What happens until you get used to embracing the anger, you'll never be able to rule it.
Wow.
So for me, when I tell my boys if I'm speaking, I ask them, I say, hey, am I angry right now? They say, no, you're calm. You exude such self-control, like you say, Stephanie. But as I sit here right now, I am very angry. I'm always angry. Why? Because evil is running rampant and unchecked in this world. However, I could sit before you and wait till the right opportunity to express that anger in powerful ways. Like I can go right now and mentor or talk to a boy who may be thinking of dying by suicide. Or right now, I can have a lot of things to do right now. But what's most important at the moment? I turn that anger against every emotion that would counter me from sitting here at this interview and being a blessing to you and my brother Lecrae. And as a byproduct, I'm being blessed by you and Lecrae.
Just in listening to the both of you, there's a lot of your foundation has been your faith, right? Your foundation has been your walk with the Lord. And so how would you encourage another to understand the role that faith plays in in the process of healing?
Everything. I mean, it's literally everything. It's I don't know how to describe it to you, but I mean, optimism is when you have evidence that things are going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Pessimism is when you have evidence that things are never going to be better. But hope is when, regardless of the evidence, you know God is faithful, and that's the only thing that carried me through some of my darkest times was hope, was holding God to His promises. Jeremiah 29:11 says that I know the plans that I have for you, plans for a future and a hope. And he gave that promise to a group of people who were going through pain and problems. And, that's how they were able to make it through that 70 years of captivity, is because they had a promise from God that they could hold on to. So even when it was ugly and terrible and they were going through the worst time of their life, they could hold on to that promise. So I think it's the same thing, is that I'm able to hold on to God's promises in the midst of my pain. I'm able to hold on to God's promises because even all the action steps that we're talking about right now, these are not going to fix it. These are going to address it. Mm. So if you are battling depression, you know what I'm saying? Counseling may not fix it. Medicine may not fix it. It's going to address it, but you can hold on to God's promises. God is, He's the consistent. There's nothing there's no guarantees on this planet, in terms of like, oh, all you got to do is do this and do this. If you do 1,000 sit-ups, you're going to have a 6-pack. That's not a guarantee. You know what I'm saying? So, but God is consistent and He doesn't break His promises. So for me, that carries me. It carries me when the country looks like it's haywire and there's no evidence in sight that it's going to get better. That carries me when, family members are incarcerated. That carries me when people get divorced and it's like, well, this is the end. Like, there's no guarantee you're going to get your relationship's going to be restored. There's no guarantee, but the guarantee you do have is that God is faithful and He's going to walk with you through this and He's going to get you through it. So that's really what, for me, it's knowing that all things work together for the good of those who love Him and called according to His purpose. I can hold on to that promise, and no matter how ugly it's gonna get, I know God is walking with me through this.
No, I love what you just said, even with just engaging the Lord, because a lot of times there is this misconception that prayer is inactive. It's almost like just speaking to whoever would listen, right? But yet we recognize that, a relationship with God is a relationship. And relationships are only cultivated when it's engaged. Relationships are cultivated when it's intentional. And I think that, to be honest, even speaking to your point earlier, Mr. Wilson, about just being that vulnerability of being weak. I think that many times there is a weakness that people find in saying, I'm worried that maybe God is not going to respond to me. I'm worried that maybe this is all in vain. So why should I speak to someone who I don't know who he is? Right. And there's a weakness in just accepting that, Lord, I don't know you, but I want to. I hear people talk about you. I've heard about the testimonies, the people that know you. There is a strength they have. There is a peace they have. And it's being weak to just say that I'm not there yet, but I'm curious about how do I get there. And so it's beautiful when we are vocal about our testimonies. It's beautiful when we are vocal, because when you see strong men like yourself, and strong men in the essence of not just the strong idea of be strong. No, I believe that strength is weakness. When men can embrace their weakness, that is strength. When men can be vocal about who they are, that is strength. When men can be authentically who they are, to me, that is strength. When men can cry, Mr. Wilson, you have a book, Cry Like a Man. That is strength to me. And so when you see that, when you see established men, when you see men that are striving with purpose and just worth, and they can talk to you about the Lord. They can talk to you that this strength that you see, it comes from leaning on him. It comes from having relationship with him. It comes from knowing that it is, I cannot be this by myself. I think that is powerful. And I truly want us to pray into that, because, again, this episode, we're going to be having many conversations just based on the times that we're in, but we found this so necessary because it starts from the heart. It starts, everything we do, all the issues in life, the Bible says, flows from the heart. And so if we don't address the heart matter, we're fighting a lost cause. And so I want us to pray into that, because I believe that there are men that will be watching this episode, and there are men who may feel like they've been running away from the Lord, and that is really the foundation that they've been looking for all their lives. Because the truth is, maybe they don't know how to be, they don't have a safe a safe space to be vulnerable. Maybe they don't know if I can trust the therapist. Maybe they won't understand me, all these things. But just to start from saying, Lord, I need you. I've heard about, there's a peace I see in people's lives, but Lord, I need you. And Lecrae, I want you to pray into that. I want you to pray for those that will be watching, and maybe right now, this moment right here is going to be the opportunity that they just finally surrender and recognize that surrender there's nothing wrong in that weakness is strength.
That's great. Yeah, I'll be honored. Well, yeah, Lord, I thank you for the unique opportunity that you give us to be your vessels to communicate your love and your truth to the world at large, and to everybody who's listening out there. God, I just pray for the people that came here needing to hear you, needing to hear some encouragement, and needing to hear some hope. And God, I'm just reminded, Father God, of Psalm 23, where you say that though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and God, I'm reminded of just that you say, though we walk through. You didn't say we stay there, we camp out there. You say we walk through it. And so, God, just that they would be encouraged that they could walk through these valleys of the shadows of death, these valleys of suppression, of depression, of Lord God, just not being who you created them to be. Father God, I pray that people would understand that they are your workmanship, created for things that you already pre-planned, that they are purposed by you, and that they do not have to be anything other than what you call them to be. And so, Lord, I just pray that you would tear down the lies that the enemy would have thrown at them about who they are and how they should function, and that, God, you would strengthen them with truth. Truth that would stand the test of time. And God, I don't know, Lord, I just feel as if there's just someone who is wrestling with you and trying to just get you to rain down a reality that things can change. They're hearing all of this stuff and just don't know how to do it, or don't believe it can be done. And God, I just pray for a significant breakthrough for them, something that just God, like a Gideon sign, that they would say, oh my goodness, you must be real. You must be speaking to me, Lord. And so, Lord, just encourage their soul, bring them on the right path, and allow them to do the work. And Lord, I also thank you for just everybody in this discussion. God, as I know we will be attacked for bringing this type of wisdom and truth to the masses. And so, Lord, just guard us and protect us. and allow us to continue staying on the path that you have us on as well. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.